Hey readers, today I want to invite you to do something that powerful readers do, to investigate the impact of setting on characters. To do this work, you're going to consider not just the physical characteristics of the setting, like where it takes place and when it takes place, but also we're going to think about the mood and the atmosphere. So in our read aloud today, let's try out this thinking work. I'm going to give you a tip. So when the setting seems ordinary, like it's just school, you have to think extra hard. Some readers would say the setting is just middle school, but we're going to be the kind of readers who ask what kind of school. Is it the kind of school where kids are good to each other? Is it the kind of school where kids can be mean to each other or hurtful to each other? Because when you ask those kinds of questions, you'll develop theories about how the mood or atmosphere of this particular place shapes the character. Okay, so ready? We're going to read another story about Will. Remember from Popularity? It's from a book called The First French Kiss. He's a little older in this time. Last time he was in the 4th grade, and this time he's in the 8th grade. So we're going to start reading, and as we read, let's think about what kind of place this is. We might also consider the other reading work that we've done so far. I'm going to show you. Remember, we've done a lot of thinking deeply about characters, so we're going to still think about these things. Even though we're shifting our focus to setting, we're still going to want to probably draw on some of this earlier thinking work. Practice with me as we read. It began with a basketball game. Mike Diechter and I went up for the same rebound, and I accidentally stuck my elbow in his chest. Then Mike stuck his elbow in my chest, pointed a finger at me, and told me to watch out. In those days, I had a reputation for toughness to maintain, so I told him he better watch out. And on the next rebound, neither of us watched out, and both of us got elbows to the chest. Then we started shoving each other under the basket and pointing fingers and making threatening faces, which was fine with me because looking threatening was one of the things I did best. Before things could get out of hand, however, gym ended, and Mike and I glared at each other and went back to our respective homerooms. Okay, so this story so far is calling for us to think about character traits, isn't it? That'll be true at the start of most stories, when the big job for readers is to get to know the characters. The good thing is that you know a lot of ways to think about characters. Look back at our anchor chart if you need ideas. What strategy are you thinking that we should get to know our characters? All right, so it's 4 years later. Will seems to still have issues with wanting to be cool. Now, it's almost worse than just wanting to be popular or cool. He wants to dominate, not just be accepted. Maybe hanging with the cool kids has gone to his head. Okay, so one thing we're realizing is that we don't stop doing character work when we take on a new lens. We're thinking about when we're thinking about the characters, it can be something that you like automatically do now because you've been practicing it. Like thinking about the people in your life, you just automatically do it. I want you to automatically be thinking about what kind of character your characters are. What are their traits? I want you to do all of this work. But we're going to then push ourselves to think about a new aspect of the story. So our new aspect now is setting, and how it can not just when and where. That's a real simplistic setting, and we're in middle school now, so we have to think a little bit deeper about it, like the atmosphere, the mood. How does it feel? So we're going to ask ourselves, what kind of gym class is this? What is this mood? Lighthearted? Is it something else? I'll think about it as well, and we can compare our thinking. I'm going to reread that same part again because when we're taking on a new lens, we really need to focus on that and reread a little bit. It began with a basketball game. Mike Diechter and I went up for the same rebound, and I accidentally stuck my elbow in his chest. Then Mike stuck his elbow in my chest, pointed a finger at me, and told me to watch out. In those days, I had a reputation for toughness to maintain, so I told him that he better watch out. And on the next rebound, neither of us watched out, and both of us got elbows in the chest. Then we started shoving each other under the basket and pointing fingers and making threatening faces, which was fine with me because looking threatening was one of the things I did best. Before things could get out of hand, however, Gym ended and Mike and I glared at each other and went back to our respective homerooms. Okay, so think now. What words would you use to describe this gym class? Just as you did at the start of the unit when you were thinking about your character's traits, try to read for exactly the right words and jot those down now on your Post-it. Okay, so I'm thinking about so far in the situation, and I'm thinking the word that comes to my mind, I think this gym class is kind of nasty. Not like nasty as in dirty dirt and germs, but the mood, how it feels is kind of nasty. It doesn't seem lighthearted or playful. It feels like something else. All those actions, like elbows being stuck in their chest, the fingers pointing, being told to watch out, those feel kind of mean to me. It feels mean. So I'm going to write mean down. Kind of nasty and unsportsmanlike. They're not really. They're playing basketball. It could go a different way. They could have fun playing basketball, but that's not the mood so far that I'm getting from the story. So what are you thinking? What are some of the words that you wrote down to describe the mood here? Some other thoughts, just thinking about some other words that I'm thinking about is I feel like they're really competitive. The two boys are really competitive, but they're not like healthy competitive. They're kind of like intimidating each other. I'm gonna write down that one. Something that kind of stuck out to me was there's a couple things that stuck out to me. So he says that they were making threatening faces. And he said, well, which was fine with me because looking threatening was one of the things I did best. And then earlier it says that he accidentally stuck his elbow into Mike's chest. And then it says, in those days, I had a reputation for toughness to maintain. So like, it feels like Will is not really tough. It feels like he's trying to act tough because of what he thinks people want him to be, so he could be cool. So like, I'm thinking fake. Will seems fake to me. So this makes me wonder if Will's whole school is always like this, or if this is like just for gym class. Is gym class especially nasty and mean and competitive, or is it different other places in the school? So you can even take a setting and think about the different places within the setting. So we have gym class here. Is the whole school like this, or is it just gym class? So so many readers would have said like, well, it's just a gym class for the setting. Like these things are setting words here. Okay. So yes, we're in gym. We have school. Okay. But y'all, that's the real basic setting. You could even say middle school for time. Real basic. I want some, how does it feel? What is the atmosphere? I'm guessing that this place seems kind of awful to me. So I want to keep on investigating how mood, this nasty, competitive, intimidating, this fake place might shape our character Will here. So I'm always going to be thinking, how does this setting shape my character? Okay. So I'm guessing that Will's actions and decisions will be affected by this atmosphere. I think that he's going to make decisions that he maybe wouldn't make in another setting with another atmosphere. He's making these decisions here in this place because of how this mood of this setting is. So we're going to read on and try to figure out how this place might wrap around Will and exert pressures on him to be nasty or mean or competitive or intimidating or fake. All right, so I'm going to read a little bit more. See what happens. Things probably would have taken a peaceful turn if I hadn't walked home with Kevin Cox after school and told him that the next time Mike and I played basketball, I was really going to throw some elbows. And if he, Mike, didn't like it, I would fight him anytime, anywhere. I don't know why I said this. Perhaps I was thinking of the Mike I'd known a year before. Perhaps I was thinking of the thin, gullible, good-natured Mike who had since grown 4 inches, gained 15 pounds, and became as humorless and menacing as a drill sergeant. Kevin looked at me doubtfully. Do you really think you can take him? He asked me. Since Kevin had always been one of my most loyal and servile followers, I was astonished by his doubt in my physical prowess. I know I can take him, I said. He's 3 inches taller than you, Kevin said. So? He's really strong. I'm really strong. Kevin shrugged. Okay, he said, but I think Mike could take you. Now it was my turn to shrug. It was also my turn to lay a condescending hand upon Kevin's shoulder and leave him to ponder his absurd and traitorous notions. The next day in school, everything proceeded as usual. I listened to the teachers, took notes, fell asleep, made a few uncalled-for remarks, and gazed at Denise Young's legs. During lunch, I was sitting with a table full of friends and talking and listening in my usual superior way when I heard Mike Doctor say, "Hey, buddy." Somehow I knew that he meant me. Somehow I also knew that all kinds of jigs were up and that something momentous was going to happen. I turned to look at him. "I hear you want to fight me," he said. "That's right," I said. "I'll meet you after school." "I'll be there," I said. Then he walked away, and I discovered 2 interesting things about myself. The first was the idea of fighting terrified me, and the second was that in moments of extreme fear, my body produced ice-cold sweat. Someone said something to me, and I smiled and nodded. Someone said something else to me, and I smiled and nodded at that too. Perhaps they were giving me advice. Perhaps they were telling me to stay low and lead with my left. I stood up, without really knowing I was standing up, and walked from the cafeteria to the playground. I never felt so lonely or frightened in my life. Somehow I'd taken a wrong turn and wound up in the wrong day, in the wrong body, with the wrong future. Somehow in 3 hours, I was going to be in a real fight with real fists, and there was no way out of it. Oh, wow. So why does Will have to be so foolish and dumb and superior? Did you hear how snotty Will can be and how he's about to get himself in trouble? Remember, I want us to keep thinking as we read, how might this setting be affecting our character? So in a moment, we're going to keep reading with this lens, but first, let's consider what we know about the setting and how it's shaping Will. Usually when we study a place, we consider the season or the time period or the city where it takes place. But the setting is more than that. It's also the mood or the atmosphere of the place. It's the way that a place shapes a person is often about the way it feels. So I'm thinking about the last story whenever he was in 4th grade. And this one and how school has changed him. In the first story, he was in elementary school, and at his school then he was on the playground. The setting was more specifically the playground, and it was kind of intimidating. Remember, he was looking across the tar and the asphalt and trying to get over there to the cool kids and figuring that out. That was intimidating to him at that time. Being with the cool kids then meant just like playing tag or making jokes on the playground, making the coolest kid in the group laugh really hard. It's really different now to be with the cool kids now that he's in middle school. So the setting, even though it's Will's school in both stories, the setting has changed. So school is the setting in both stories, but if I just leave it at school, then it doesn't tell me very much about the setting other than school. Just saying school doesn't tell me how it affects my character. And that's what I'm going for, is I want to know, how is this place? How does it feel? And how does that affect my character? So what kind of place is this? All right, so I'm going to read a little bit more, and I'm going to reread a little part from what I just read there. And I want you to think about a few things. I want you to think about, how is this particular setting really affecting Will? During lunch, I was sitting with a table full of friends, talking and listening in my usual superior way, when I heard Mike Dieter say, "Hey, buddy." Somehow I knew that he meant me. Somehow I also knew that all kinds of jigs were up, that something momentous was going to happen. I turned to look at him. "I hear you want to fight me," he said. "That's right," I said. "I'll meet you after school." "I'll be there," I said. Then he walked away, and I discovered two interesting things about myself. The first was the idea of fighting terrified me, and the second was that in moments of extreme fear, my body produced ice cold sweat. Someone said something to me, and I smiled and nodded. Someone else said something to me, and I smiled and nodded at that too. Perhaps they were giving me advice. Perhaps they were telling me to stay low and lead with my left. I stood up without really knowing I was standing up, and walked from the cafeteria to the playground. I never felt so lonely or frightened in my life. Somehow I'd taken a wrong turn and wound up on the wrong day in the wrong body with the wrong future. Somehow, in 3 hours, I was going to be in a real fight with real fists, and there was no way out of it. Okay, so now I want you to think about what kind of school this is and how it might be shaping Will. Okay, so we've read a little bit more, and we can know a little bit more. So what do you think? One phrase that stood out to me was Will said all kinds of jigs were up. What do you think that means? All kinds of jigs were up. Maybe it's like he's about to get found out. Remember, because he's kind of fake. Maybe he's about to get found out. What does this suggest about this place and how Will has to act to fit in? I'm thinking students like Mike have also changed a whole lot, becoming big and tough. Because he says, whenever earlier when he said, perhaps I was thinking of the thin, gullible, good-natured Mike, who'd since grown 4 inches, gained 15 pounds, and became humorless and menacing as a drill sergeant. So Mike has changed a lot. So, he became big and tough, and Will seems to sit with a bunch of friends. I know one thing that he says that he's acting all superior. That's another thing that he says. So I'm going to say Will is acting all superior. And then Mike is acting tough. Now, I don't know Mike's story as much as Will's, but, I always go back and think, like, I wonder what happened. Why did they change that way? Not tougher. He's acting tough. These things are like, it's like they're posing. They're pretending to be something that they're not, maybe. I'm getting a little bit of evidence that makes me feel like they're posing. Also, they've become bigger and tougher. All of the kids have become bigger and tougher. It's almost like they have something to prove. This could have gone a different way. Students like Mike changed a lot. Will seems to be sitting with a bunch of people that he wants to be superior over. Nobody at his table spoke up. Like, nobody said, hey, that could be a really dumb idea. Fighting over gym class is really stupid and dumb and ridiculous. Like, you shouldn't do it. They just all kind of watched. And whenever Mike comes and calls Will out, like, it could have gone a different direction if the setting was different, or if maybe one person in the setting was different. So the next step is we're going to put all these clues together and analyze how the setting affects the whole story. First, I might think about all of these details, including the ones from the beginning. All these details shows that gym class is nasty, intimidating place. Now I'm going to add in and then I've added in like what the kids are like in this setting and how that they all seem to be posing, except for the kids who are just watching. All those details make me think about two things. First of all, this school, not just the gym class, but this school is tough. Like it's really tough. Okay. All right, it's a tough place. So you see what I did there? I gathered these details and thought about what's the atmosphere of the place, and I thought about what's important in this place, what matters most to these kids, and I realized that it really seems important here to seem tough. Tough is a big word that keeps standing out to me in my head whenever I'm thinking about how this place shapes Will. It makes sense. He needs to be tough because that's what matters in this place. And again, remember, he wanted to be popular, so he wanted to fit in with what mattered in that place when he was in 4th grade. And it's the same thing now that he's in 8th grade. So we're going to read a little bit more, and while we read, see if this next part starts to suggest new thinking about this place and that it's making Will need to be tough, even if he might not feel that way. Okay, so I'm going to read a little bit more to you. My biggest problem, I knew, was that I didn't hate Mike or even dislike him. I had no animal rage to ball my hands in a fist and thrust them into action, no deep-seated envy or resentment to impel me toward him with the object of destruction. All I had was fear and pride, which was a pretty poor combination as far as fighting is concerned, because all pride could do was guarantee that I show up for the fight, and all fear could do was guarantee that I lose it. The rest of the day passed in a haze of anticipation and dread. I sat through my classes, a smiling, silent shell of my former self, and tried to look as casual and confident as possible. Now and then, I would look up at the clock and realize that the fight was only 1 hour and 49 minutes away. 1 hour and 40 minutes. I tried to tell myself that it might be a 1 or 2 punch fight, that maybe Mike would throw a punch and I would throw a punch and we'd both smile and throw our arms around each other and become friends for life. But I knew it would not be a 1 or 2 punch fight. No, it would be a fight to some extreme and horrifying limit, a fight to unconsciousness or hospitalization or reconstructive surgery. Unconsciousness, hospitalization, reconstructive surgery? What are you thinking about our theories about this place being pretty tough? What does that mean for Will? Will's words do confirm that this place is tough. He expects this fight to be serious. Our theory about this place seems confirmed. Will's going to have to be pretty tough to survive. So let's name some of the reading work that we've done so far. So first of all, the work that you've learned to do is thinking about the character. Thinking about our character continues to be critical. Okay, this is still critical. We have to be doing this. You definitely want to keep thinking and jotting about those characters as you read all the time. So you also found that it can pay off to investigate the setting, especially its mood, because it might influence and shape the character. Okay, so I'm going to start a chart to capture this new work, so you can go on it to go on it while you're reading your books. Okay, so some things that we have started to investigate the influence of setting on our characters. We have asked, what kind of place is this? What kind of place is this? It's really important to start off by asking that. And we have also considered the mood of the place. Okay. So here's some examples. Is it thrilling, dangerous, intimidating, calm, nasty, mean, competitive, intimidating, fake? So we've considered the mood of the place. All right. So the setting work really isn't just for us to practice while we're reading in the fight. Will's not the only character who's affected by a setting. School's not the only place that has its own kind of mood or atmosphere. Some of you might be reading a book like The Hunger Games, or you might have watched The Hunger Games, for example. So in The Hunger Games, the setting is the arena, but it's so much more than that. The arena has its own atmosphere. If you haven't read The Hunger Games and you want to investigate setting, the arena is a great setting to investigate, and all the characters within that book. You might be reading a book like The Fault in Our Stars. So if you're reading a book like that, I wonder what the mood might be in a home with a family that's struggling from a cancer diagnosis. How does the mood affect the character? So I'll be really curious to see the words that you think of to describe the atmosphere or mood of your settings in your books. And how do you think these places are affecting your characters? During your practice time, I want you to work on rereading with this lens. Think about the parts that you're going to go back to and reread, because that's important too. Parts where you think this new work that we practiced today will especially pay off. You probably already know the setting of your book. You probably know when the story takes place, where the story takes place, but I want you to find spots where you can push your thinking about how the setting affects the characters further. Those of you starting a new book might read the beginning twice with this lens in mind. Make a plan and then get started.